Hello and welcome to Stoughton Politics with this guy. I'm very pleased today to be interviewing Craig MacLellan, who is one of our candidates running for DA. So, Craig, first off, welcome and thank you for being on the show.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm very grateful. Always exciting to talk about the race and my candidacy, so thanks.
My pleasure. Start us off with a little bit about your background. I understand you worked as a prosecutor in the Suffolk County DA's office for a time?
I did, yes. That was my first professional role after graduating from law school.
Oh, wow.
I was a prosecutor in Suffolk County for just shy of 10 years.
Okay.
And I worked in the Safe Neighborhood and Youth Violence unit in that office.
Okay.
And where we prosecuted crimes like, narcotics-related offenses, firearms-related offenses, shootings, things of that nature. And then from there, I moved to a different state agency called the Commission on Judicial Conduct.
Okay.
Where we were charged with investigating complaints or claims of misconduct against Massachusetts state judges.
Yeah.
And I stayed there for a fairly brief stint, about 2 years, and had some great coworkers there and enjoyed that role. Started having children, and so my official public service roles took a brief respite, and I went to a law firm in Boston for some time, and then shortly thereafter I established my own law practice where I began serving in part as a public bar advocate for indigent defendants in my local courthouse.
Excellent.
On the criminal defense side, and I volunteer as a school committee member on my town school committee.
Yes, I was going to ask about that because I see that you kind of wear many hats in Cohasset. So you're on the school committee. Are you on any other town? I feel like I saw you doing more than one thing in town government.
Yes, and that's partly goes hand in hand why I'm running for this position, right? I'm a big believer in public service and contributing to your community, and so school committee's been a labor of love. I absolutely adore being on the committee, and it's a total privilege and a total honor. I've done it for 7 years, so I'm in my third term now. But to answer your question, I'm involved in some other things in town. Yes, I serve on the steering committee for our Safe Harbor Coalition, which is to combat youth substance abuse. Bring awareness to substance abuse and things of that nature in town, and it's a great organization because it's very much youth or student driven. There's a lot of student ambassadors involved in that organization, so I get to work with them. Kind of again intersects with my work on the school committee, and I also I don't know if I will be the one to do it this year, but at least for the last 3 years and for the inaugural year, I was sort of in charge of the town's 4th of July celebration.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Fantastic. So lots of organizational stuff going on there.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah.
That's fantastic. How did you get started in doing that? You just felt that now that you had kids and you were settling in, you kind of wanted more town involvement?
So in general with the town involvement, you mean?
Yeah. What made you say okay, I want to change career paths from something that is state, first prosecutions and then kind of this statewide, very interesting work of investigating state judges who've had complaints made against them to working more locally. Because
I missed the public service, right? It's a total void for me. I mean, that's always been, that's why I went to law school, is to work in public service. But had to sort of veer off that path, at least briefly, for the realities of life and raising children and paying mortgages, things like that. And so, I saw a great opportunity. I'm also very passionate about education. The sort of my origin story or the genesis of my commitment to public service arises out of a high school history teacher that I had that sort of changed the course of my life. So I've always maintained a very close connection to public service and education. So what better role for me than the school committee, right? Where I can have an impact on our community's children and the education that is being delivered to them.
That's great. And what made you say to yourself, okay, but I need to, I need to run for DA, even though presumably DA would take you away from school committee work, would take you away from that is it not a not-for-profit that does the working with
Safe
youth,
Harbor.
the Safe Harbor.
Yes. Yes, I think actually I could probably still be involved in that, but it wouldn't entirely take me away from it.
Okay.
But I've always wanted to run for public office, and to an extent I have already done that, and I hold a public office. It is an elected office that I say volunteer, but because sometimes it's the job that nobody wants. But it is elected, the school committee. DA is something that I started my legal career out in that role, and it's always something that I've had an eye on. But I think you have to get the requisite experience before you step up, and the right timing has a lot to do with when you make that decision. But it won't entirely take me away from education and youth, because of sort of part of my vision for that office. Should I be elected, of course I would not be able to hold two elected roles. So yes, I would not serve on the committee anymore as an elected member. But I am a firm believer that all of our DAs should be partnering with at least our public schools, and collaborating with district leadership to deliver some programming that focuses on good decision making, weighing the consequences of one's actions before they become problematic. Perhaps thinking about responsible management of our digital footprint, and awareness of what happens when we send things out into the internet about ourselves or about others, and the effects they can have. I actually tried to initiate this sort of discussion with the DA's office and the current administration, and it sort of fell off, which I think maybe lent itself to my fervor in running for this position. But so I'm a believer that there should be a collaboration between public safety, law enforcement, and the schools. And I'm proud to say that in Cohasset, we have an absolutely exceptional police department that has a really great connection with our schools, and some great student resource officers. And so I would just be looking to build upon that in the other communities throughout Norfolk County.
Okay, interesting. So tell me a little more sort of broadly about how do you envision change for the DA's office? What is the kind of organization you would like to lead there?
So that's a big question, right? It's kind of the big question. I think first let's start at a baseline of, I think there has been an erosion of sort of public trust around our criminal justice complex, let's call it locally, including and especially the district attorney. So I think that the first step in repairing that damage is to acknowledge some shortcomings, to acknowledge some failures, and to identify them, publicly. I think that too often, our public officials are unwilling to do that because they're perhaps, and I'm not speaking about anyone in particular right now, I'm speaking generally, perhaps it might be the fear that they are going to damage their reputation. But, in my opinion, I think that residents that are served by a public office really respect it when someone says, you know what, we have failed here, we have failed you. And because that's the first step in identifying a need for improvement, areas for improvement, right?
Absolutely.
And to collaborate with everyone that's served by the office and say, like, how can we do better? We failed here, so let's course correct together and improve where we failed in the past. So that, I think, is the first step of what
acknowledge harm done,
of what we need to do, right? And then sort of another, I think, foundational element here is we need to elect a DA who is going to inject some enthusiasm and some energy and some innovation, and just demonstrate a genuine commitment to the residents that they serve. That's going to go a long way, and that's part of my vision. I mean, I'm going to approach this role from a community-centric, service-oriented perspective, because I think that is what leads to good government. Because I think that we need to understand that this is nobody's job, Okay, it's not. If I'm elected, it's not my job. It's not. It's not. So once we start thinking of it in terms, it's basically it's a responsibility to others, held in public trust. That's how it needs to be viewed. Once it's viewed as this is my job and I'm going to be defensive of my job, that's when we're veering down a challenging path.
Okay.
Okay.
So when you say this isn't a job, you mean more along the lines of this is not like a career with career advancement and career.
Correct.
You know, this is not about protecting your own paycheck and
Exactly.
And so on.
It's not
This is
individualized.
Right.
Exactly.
Excellent. You talk also about enthusiasm, bringing enthusiasm to the role. So other than collaborations with public schools, what are some parts of the DA's job that you're enthusiastic about?
Sure. I want to, a huge part of my vision is engagement. Okay. And when I say we need to reimagine how the office serves the public, I want you to imagine an office where the DA comes out to Stoughton and says, hey, Stoughton, we're going to have a series of public safety forums. Okay? Everyone's invited, and we'll have a general agenda where we're going to talk about crime statistics or criminal trends in Stoughton. What types of crimes are happening? Where are they happening? What are the arrest rates currently, conviction rates currently? What do we think the root causes of these issues are?
Yeah.
Okay? And then we're going to propose some programs or initiatives or policies that we think will target those root causes and serve to eradicate those crimes in the community. But before we do that, we're just proposing them to you, so that you can tell us, as residents of Stoughton, whether you think that makes sense or you think some different iteration of that makes sense. And then once we all agree on a potential solution, because we won't know until it's in practice, we'll roll that out. And then that won't be the last time you hear from us. We're going to come back in 6 or 9 or 12 or 18 months, whatever makes sense, and we're going to come back and we're going to address the same criminal statistics and trends and look at the same areas and decide together if this is working. And if it is, great, we're going to stay on that path. If it's not, then let's decide together how we're going to pivot to start making a difference and start making a dent in this. That is called accountability, right? Because you are there in person confronting concerns, questions, dissent, huge part of it, right? And you are collaborating with everyone. So not only does every action you take as a public servant reflect the will of the public, but everyone has had agency in this, or at least the opportunity to participate in this. So that is a huge part of my vision for the office. I want everyone to know who their DA is, know how to contact them, know how to express and share concern, and feel empowered to do that. Feel like it's going to matter. Feel like when you say something to the DA, there is a response there. Because one unique quality about the DA's office, Noah, is that even though it's a very impactful office and deals with very important subject matter, public safety, law enforcement, it's also a very local role, right? There's a handful of communities, 28 communities in Norfolk County, including Stoughton, okay? So having a very engaged, connected DA is an incredibly attainable goal. And that's a goal of mine.
Fantastic. I like that answer. Okay, what in your opinion makes your particular experience the right kind of experience for this role?
It's the diversity of my experience. So I guess the number one thing that qualifies me is my criminal experience, but I'm going to build upon that in a minute.
Sure.
Before I do, though, I want to highlight another unique characteristic of the DA's office.
Okay.
It's a public office that is best served being run by a practitioner and not a seasoned politician. Okay? And that's not what we have right now. Right now, the current DA has held public office in some way, shape, or form for 50 years as of the next, a straight, continuous 50 years as of next year, the election year. Okay? And that's not to pick on him. He's chosen to dedicate himself to public service. I'm not here to comment on Michael Morrissey or, I'm here to talk about what I want to bring to the role. But I say that it's better served having a practitioner in the role because having someone that has served as a prosecutor and a defense attorney who has always retained a connection to the criminal justice system in Massachusetts, who is day in, day out practicing law in our criminal courts, they are the ones that are best outfitted as an office leader to identify what works and what doesn't, and identify areas for improvement, potential policies, or prosecutorial programming that will best serve the residents of Norfolk County. So the first part of my experience is the most important, and that is that I've served on both sides of the courtroom. That is the most important. I think I'm the only candidate in the race that can boast that experience. I think that having the defense experience, so obviously prosecution experience is, in my opinion, it's a prerequisite. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know that anyone should be running for DA if they have not been a prosecutor. However, I will say that being a defense attorney is extremely important because it exposes you to a whole new set of considerations and perspectives that you are not possibly exposed to as a prosecutor.
Yeah.
Impacts on various individuals. Again, getting back to the root causes of crime, understanding that, what drives people that engage in criminal behavior. You have a better exposure to those considerations as a defense attorney than a prosecutor. I'm not saying that prosecutors don't have any exposure to that.
Right.
Many skilled, seasoned prosecutors in our various counties throughout the Commonwealth that I think do a terrific job. But I do think that that criminal defense experience is it's invaluable to becoming developing a really
a more comprehensive view of the law.
Global perspective. That's correct. So that's the first, I think, element of my experience that I think uniquely qualifies me for the role. The additional background that I bring to the table is my experiences that we talked about earlier in local government. Okay, what I have learned, and so a lot of the perspective I just voiced to you about engagement with the community and ensuring, bringing people in, making sure they participate, that is something I have refined over the last 7 years and have learned in that local role, and it served me so well because again, it's a sort of a microcosm. Cohasset is a very small community, in Norfolk County, and I've served in a public role for just shy of a decade now, and it will be almost a decade when I'm finished with my term. If I finish my term, if I'm elected, I won't be able to finish my term. But it has allowed me to see the power behind bringing people into the fold and involving them in policy formation and discussions of any impactful issues. And there are certain processes that you should employ in doing that. And I plan to bring many of the same practices to the DA's office because they've been so effective. We've seen a surge of community awareness in what the school committee is doing in Cohasset since I've been on there. And I am not, by the way, taking the credit for all of that.
Right.
I am 20% of the school committee. I have served with amazing people. Almost everyone that I've served with, I've become great friends with. But it shifts because there's always different people on there. But throughout my years, I've seen an improvement in the awareness throughout the community and interest in what we're doing and the participation. And I think then that has when you have the community invest themselves, you see the product improve. And our schools, I think, have really blossomed into something special since we've rolled out that type of approach. And so that's why I think when I'm looking at what's happening here in Norfolk County from a criminal justice, from a law enforcement perspective, I'm seeing this and I know exactly how to fix this. It's not going to be overnight, right? Because trust takes a while to build. But I know exactly how we can do this. I know the path to repairing that and restoring the public's confidence in this office.
Okay. What do you see as the appropriate relationship between the DA's office and local law enforcement? Because one of the complaints against DA Morrissey is this kind of buddy-buddy relationship that at times appears to override good law. And I know that there are, that some people on the other side have concerns in the opposite direction that, we don't support the police enough, and so on. And so I'm interested in what you see as the appropriate relationship to have with law enforcement.
Well, it's a close one, okay? A close one and a productive one. Again, I'm going to use the analogy that I have or to relate to my school committee experience, and that we have I mentioned this earlier, we have a really good relationship with our police department. So that is fundamental. You have to have that. And I understand why sometimes that leads people to believe that, the fix is in, or there's too many, there's too much politics involved, and there's a lack of objectivity that stems from that.
Right.
But if it's done in open and transparent manner, right, people will not feel that way. I think that one of the things that I saw work well when I was a prosecutor is to have sort of a geographically targeted prosecution model where you have certain teams of your assistant DAs and your victim witness advocates and your investigators assigned to certain districts, right? So it's the same group of people, and then the community begins to know them because they are required to engage in outreach and attend community events, and so then there's that connection where people know who to contact with issues. The prosecutors in turn learn the community. So if there's a crime on a certain street or a certain store or something like that, the prosecutors know where it is. They can immediately envision the crime scene. It will give them a better understanding at arraignment of what was involved here. Regular meetings with the police departments will encourage collaboration, growth, and partnership between the DA's office and the police departments. But you were asking specifically about the district attorney himself.
Yeah.
And I think that they go hand in hand. I mean, yes, I do believe in these teams being sort of the day-to-day connection. I mean, there's one district attorney, there's multiple departments. You can't be out there all the time. But the DA absolutely needs to have a great relationship with all of the police chiefs and department leadership, because they also have to trust the DA. Right, and they are the ones with the most community knowledge, and if there are issues within the police departments and they're confronting challenges, they're confronting some public dissent, I think that it's incumbent upon the DA to be involved and to collaborate with both the community and the departments on how to address it. You're going to run into challenges with public organizations, and you shouldn't shy away from it. But I certainly do not believe that the DA should take a hands-off approach because he is concerned that it's going to promote the appearance of a lack of objectivity, that they're buddy-buddy. I think you can absolutely have very valuable, healthy, productive, professional relationships without it becoming a personal relationship that makes everyone concerned that there's a problem with impartiality or objectivity.
Okay. I'm going to ask that later.
I'll be waiting.
So in this era, how do you feel about the prosecution of civil disobedience? Because often protesters are, officially speaking, doing something that is unlawful. Maybe they didn't get a permit. Maybe they are blocking a highway, right? Where do you draw the line between First Amendment rights being absolutely vital and kind of throwing the book at protesters?
Well, first of all, I don't think that the other end of that spectrum would be quote unquote throwing the book. There may be some action taken, right? But who knows what? There's a whole spectrum of different levels of action that one could take. But the short answer to the question is safety. When there's a threat to public safety, that's when you need to act. And I think that those can be anticipated fairly well. And again, if there's good partnerships with the departments and good partnerships with various organizations in the community, then there may be some collaboration ahead of time where we were able to anticipate some problems like road closures or things that might aggravate folks or get incense the situation a bit. And so I think planning can go a long way with that and collaboration, but it's the short answer is safety. When the public safety is at risk, that is when action needs to be taken. But action that is appropriately proportionate to the safety risk. Right?
Excellent.
If people are running around with assault rifles, that is an extreme situation, right?
Yeah.
If people are, walking maybe off the sidewalk in the street, that's a threat to public safety. People could get hit by cars. It could cause motorists to swerve and hit other cars. Okay, but perhaps it doesn't require, some sort of severe response with, armed police coming in and forcibly taking down residents, right?
And presumably, if people are actually blocking a street, then we're not increasing the risk of a car swerving because the car's not going anywhere.
It's true. So I think that all of that needs to be taken into consideration. I think that our country is based in part on civil disobedience.
Absolutely.
I think we can't forget where we came from. So that's an important, I think that's like an important thread in our history. But at the same time, you need to make sure everyone's safe. I mean, that is paramount. And I think that is the determining factor, and that's the answer to your question.
Are there any kinds of charges that you don't think, maybe not categorically, because it's hard to say categorically, charge X is nonsense and I'm never going to bring it against someone. But are there any kinds of charges that you would say this is not something we should be focusing on? This is not something that we should prosecute, because to some extent, part of a positive collaboration with local law enforcement is to kind of teach each other what, where you stand and what your roles are, and to say, like, if you bring me cases like this, I'm not going to try those. Don't arrest somebody for jaywalking. I'm not gonna ever pursue those charges. So, here are some common things you should leave alone, right? Are there any of those for you?
My personal opinion doesn't matter.
Okay.
Okay, so as the question, your answer to your question is no right now.
Okay.
However, the longer answer is that is exactly the type of thing that we would be talking about at these forums that I'm talking about with each community, right? Does the community feel a certain way about certain charges? Because there's a reverse to that. There's the other side of the leaf, so to speak, right? Where some residents may feel, or some communities, may feel really strong about certain charges, right?
Absolutely.
So there may be, for example, a community with a significant retail presence where they're seeing a lot of shoplifting cases. In some jurisdictions, shoplifting may really not be of interest to folks, and it's like, we're concentrating on folks, that don't have a lot of resources. This is not getting us anywhere from a, from a sort of public safety or criminal justice perspective, but in some communities, you might say, this is causing a real problem in our community. This is a quality of life issue. We need to take a really strong stance on shoplifting, even though some people might view it as a minor offense. So I would never answer that question without speaking to the community that we're talking about, right? That's exactly the kind of approach I'm talking about. This is it in action, right? So this is why I was saying it's not my job.
Right.
It's a responsibility to the communities that I serve. So I have to get their perspective. Now, is there a general prosecutorial? I mean, you answer that question. I think you look at every case, in a vacuum. We're talking about. I haven't gone to any.
Right.
I assume the role. January of 2027, I'm elected, and I'm coming in. Okay, I haven't had the chance to schedule any forms, anything like that. So what do I do? You look at, and this is what I've always done, and this is what I was trained to do when I was starting out 20 years ago. You look at all the facts and circumstances you can possibly know about the case. You look at, the victims, whether it's a retail location or an individual. You look at the history of the person that has been arrested. Yeah. You look at, what are we talking about? We're talking about a shoplifting case where someone's stealing some food, and the defense attorney is relating to you that there's a problem, and they had children and they're living out of their car or something like that. You got to take that into consideration, even though that maybe the grocery store is out some merchandise. That's also a consideration, right? But then you sort of decide and you train, and I wouldn't be doing this as the assistant DA. I would no longer, be that involved. I mean, excuse me,
Right,
as the
as
district
the-
attorney,
as
the
the
assistant
DA,
DA would
yeah.
be, right?
Right.
And so you have to train your assistant DAs to look at this and to make reasonable, rational conclusions about what the right recommendation is. And I was always trained that if you have a rational, good faith basis for any recommendation to the court, and then you're able to back it up, right? It's when you're doing things without really a purpose that you find yourself in trouble. Right. So I can't answer that question, in terms of particular specific charges. The answer is actually I can't answer. It's no. I mean, I cannot identify a particular. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, possession of marijuana, we're never going to prosecute that. Well, that's not, I can't say that because I haven't talked to the residents in the various communities yet and how they feel about that. I can tell you that someone that is, arrested for a crime for the first time in their life and might be, 21 years old, is likely going to be treated a little bit different than someone that's arrested for the same exact crime that has a very lengthy criminal history with a history of long-term incarceration that and crimes of violence. It'll likely be treated differently.
Okay.
So that's
I'm going to oversimplify your position, and you're going to tell me why it's wrong,
Sure.
okay? I'm going to say, okay, you believe in the DA's office having a different approach to each community based on what people in the community have told the DA's office they want. So as a consequence, the law will be enforced differently in Quincy than it is in Stoughton.
Yeah, so it's not going to be enforced differently, right? The approach will be different. The policies may be different. The attention paid to the individual crimes may be different, right? The engagement in the community may be different. I think it's more about the community may have an interest, more of an interest in hearing about, again, we'll use that retail-centric community.
Yes.
They've expressed a defined interest in crimes of shoplifting, where there's another community that is seeing a Melnea Cass situation where there's a lot of open drug use, right? That doesn't mean that in the shoplifting community we're saying, hey everyone, we're not prosecuting drug crimes here, right? It just means that you wanted to hear about shoplifting, our arrest rates, our conviction rates, what we're doing about it, build some programming around it to eradicate that type of crime here in this area. And in here, same thing with the narcotics-related crimes, right? But it doesn't mean that we're not prosecuting shoplifting over here, or that we're even enforcing the narcotics crimes differently than we're doing it here. There just may be some defined programming that's targeting those types of crimes in a certain community.
Okay. Yeah, because it's kind of long been a complaint in minority communities in particular that they are both over-policed and under-policed at the same time, right? That it's like, okay, you guys are constantly arresting and prosecuting people for drug crimes and maybe retail crimes or something, and not prosecuting our murders. Right, not investigating the murders in our community, not investigating domestic violence in our community, et cetera. Right, so you get this feeling that law enforcement and subsequently the DA are over focused on one kind of thing to the detriment of the community as a whole, and so I like the answer of different communities need different things, or have different particular interests in hearing more about what you're going to do about a certain kind of crime. But it's I want to be very conscious of what this means to have the same kind of prosecutorial approach to one place as to another.
I think maybe I can clarify by saying, let's do a very thorough professional job in terms of prosecuting all criminal activity that happens in a community, right? That's
Okay.
sort of like your baseline.
Okay.
And then you're having these forums to identify specific areas of concern,
Okay.
right? So you're not having these forums to decide what do we prosecute and what don't we prosecute here, or what's an important crime or what's not an important crime. Everything is important because it all has an impact on public safety.
Yeah.
But there may be specific interests, there will be specific targeted interests of residents that you need to pay more attention to and maybe develop some programming around. And that, by the way, could be some violent crimes. That
Right.
could be that. I'm using these misdemeanors as
Right.
examples just
Right.
because it's less provocative to talk about. But
Indeed.
so I don't want anyone out there thinking, oh, this guy's going to sort of ignore felonies because of these quality of life misdemeanors. That's not at all what I'm saying. I would bring a whole new level of
Right.
professionalism and experiences and accountability and empathy to all prosecutions.
Yeah.
I just want to encourage and empower community participation
Yeah.
and involvement in the programmings and policies of their district attorney's office. And people are going to care about, so less people are impacted by a crime of, crimes of murder or capital crimes or these major felonies
Yeah.
than these sort of everyday crimes, right? Vehicular break-ins,
Right.
house break-ins, things like that. So oftentimes communities have defined interest in that until
Yeah.
a grisly homicide happens in your community, like it happened in Cohasset not too long ago.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and then you need to focus on that and show some, targeted leadership around that particular crime and event and incident to reassure citizens, things of that nature. But that's why I'm sort of focusing on those sort of quality of life crimes, because that's what's going to be, generally speaking, of omnipresent interest to folks.
Right.
But don't get the impression that I'm saying that those are the only things that are important.
Yeah.
Again, public safety is paramount.
Well,
all of those things go to public safety.
Kind of the reason I ask these questions is that I always think back to the example of former DA Rollins, who said very explicitly, there are certain crimes that I think are BS, that these are charges I will not bring, and my community needs a much deeper focus on, some really serious criminal offenses, and it needs so much of a focus on those that, yes, I am going to tell the public and the Boston Police Department that don't bring me charges. Don't even bother arresting people under those charges because we have better things to work on. And so, seeing that example, I don't immediately assume that this model is the only model. That we will prosecute all the things as we deem appropriate is everybody's take, right? So I'm interested in teasing out what makes that a different case or just a different style.
So I think that I'd agree with former DA Rollins' general sentiment and where she was coming from, the impetus behind that, right? Okay, the problem was the approach and execution there, in my opinion,
Okay.
right? So I have never served as a DA to date. I've been an assistant DA, and I have not been a U.S. attorney, and so I'm talking about, and I don't want to appear critical of someone else's administration. It's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about what I would
For
bring.
sure.
But I'm going to give you you just asked me, so I'm going to give you my perspective on what is different about that than my vision.
Yeah.
Because there are some similarities. Because what she was doing there was she was saying that she believes that her community felt that they were being, I think, unfairly targeted by those crimes and prejudiced by, arrests and prosecutions of those nature.
For sure.
She had
more or less the data to back it up too.
a minority-laden community.
Yep.
Okay, and then you look at the data, right? And that's I think that's where she sort of developed that perspective.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of goes in hand with what I'm talking about. She was trying to be reflective of the will of the community. I think where that went wrong, because she did confront a lot of, I think, dissent and controversy around that, was the lack of, I think, deliberation in the rollout. She was a brand new DA, and I think it was taking a, and again, this is my personal opinion, okay? So
absolutely.
I'm entitled to it just like anyone else, but I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm just giving you my thoughts. I think she took what could be characterized as a new sheriff in town approach.
Absolutely.
She was dealing with Suffolk County is a unique county when you're talking about DA's office because it's predominantly BPD, Boston Police Department, is not the only department, but it is pretty much the department you're dealing with.
It is.
And as you know, it is a well-entrenched organization and institution.
Absolutely.
So coming in as a newly elected official, who isn't a career law enforcement officer, and telling superintendents and commissioners what's what, or local police captains at the district level, that wasn't, I don't think that was received well. So there was problems with the rollout there, and that I think allowed critics to latch onto that too. And it was just, I think it was, it just wasn't slow enough and deliberate enough, and I think it lacked the patience of what a successful program would have. And this is part of what I've learned in the school committee.
Sure.
So whenever we're considering an impactful change, again, just to sort of bring it back to my own experiences, right? We float the idea, the concept in an open meeting to everyone. We advertise that we're thinking about it, and we just mention it and maybe dedicate 5 or 10 minutes of preliminary discussion to it. And at the next meeting, and we advertise that we're going to be deliberating on it and talking about it in depth, and we want everyone to come and share their perspective at the next meeting. That's when we're all going to have a really robust discussion about this issue. And even then, a decision isn't made. Then at the third meeting, we'll have some final discussion and the vote on it. So in this way, people are, and again, microcosm, right? Very small sort of miniature model of what I'm talking about in response to your question about the Suffolk DA's policies. But you need to sort of introduce the concept and then invite discussion, because the idea can get better. When you have to, it's not, I don't want people to think that like you're doing this because you just want to give people the opportunity and check the box. Okay, we heard from everyone, we already knew what we were going to do. That's not good government. Okay, good government is actually listening to that input and saying, that's a good idea. I'm considering some, fiscal program, and that's a person that has, master's in financial administration, and they just happen to be a resident, and that's something I didn't think of. That was an unintended consequence I didn't think of, and we just made our idea better. Right. And then after you have the discussion, then only then do you implement, do you execute. And after execution, remember, when I first started out talking to you.
Is you don't stop. You don't say, okay, great, we're executing it. You revisit. And come back and say, okay, has that changed things? How have things improved or not improved?
And that is where I think that's where we saw maybe less success in that program that you were talking about in the Suffolk DA's office. I think that the rollout was the problem. The sentiment may not have been faulted. I do think that taking a blanket approach to just a general type of crime, that's why I didn't answer that question, because I don't believe in that. I mean, every case is unique. That's a problem, And I think that if they had rolled that out in a little bit more of a deliberate way. And again, I had a lot of friends working in that office that I have known from when I worked there, that were in leadership positions. I respect these people, but ultimately the decision rests and the responsibility rests with the elected official. And I think that perhaps it could have benefited from a little bit more input. But that's just my personal opinion, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's just how I feel.
This country, and I'm sure this county within it, has a history of imprisoning people based on faulty evidence. It's just, it is undeniable. Faulty evidence is presented in court. Faulty evidence is accepted by juries. people get imprisoned over it. Are there forms of evidence that you personally consider to be too flawed for use, even though they are allowed in court, that would influence how you investigate and prosecute? Because, for example, right, give a good example. There are decades of psychology studies finding that eyewitness testimony is really terrible in terms of its accuracy. That people are bad at recognizing other people they don't know in lineups. They are easily influenced by police investigators who want them to choose a certain person, right? That it's one thing if you see your cousin Jerry commit a crime, then you know what he looks like. You're like, it was him, right? I know him. He looks like that. He sounds like that, right? But if I walked out of here and committed a crime, and you saw me, okay, we've been talking for a while, but would you know my color eyes? Would you know what I look like without a beard, etc., right? There are forms of evidence like that have been accepted for a long time, but that are maybe flawed. Is there anything like that you say, let's take a step back. What is the evidence that you've gathered? And never mind, can I convince a jury based on this evidence? Right? There's a duty to not prosecute on a crime you think you cannot in good faith expect to win the case. But there is actually a difference between thinking you have enough evidence to convince a jury and thinking that your evidence is solid enough that you believe it. So how do you feel about that kind of gray area?
It's a really interesting question, and this is a super engaging discussion. So
we aim to please.
I love talking. I love talking about it. Right. That's why I'm running for the office. But I think so. As you were initially asking the question, sure. I immediately thought of eyewitness testimony. Right.
Okay. Excellent.
But I would say that all evidence falls in that category. I mean, you have to make sure that what you're presenting is not. It does not present some inherent bias or something that could be misleading. People could easily misinterpret. But at the same time, I wouldn't write off any types of evidence, any forms of evidence, because it's just every single case is different. And yes, there's that famous law school example we're all told in evidence class of the professor demonstrating to everyone how unreliable eyewitness testimony is by having some random student run through the class and do something crazy in the middle of class, and then ask everyone a series of questions: what kind of shoes are wearing, what color shirt, and people will have different answers to that question.
Absolutely,
right? So it demonstrates how imperfect that evidence is. Nevertheless. Yeah. It can't be ignored that someone's saying they were there for an incident and that they have some information to offer, and that's why there are, that's why the jury is charged in the law, and there are instructions that help the jury interpret the evidence and weigh the evidence, and that's why there's a process called cross-examination, where a skilled defense attorney is going to stand up and try and demonstrate to the jury that maybe this person wasn't in the best position to perceive what it is they're testifying to.
Right. Or
maybe there is some inherent bias, or maybe for some reason they're just not being forthcoming, right? Just to use this same eyewitness testimony form of evidence as an example. But I think just each case has to be taken individually and assessed individually. I mean, you got, I've always, as a criminal defense attorney, always looked at the OUI, the operating on the influence cases, drunk driving cases, right?
Absolutely.
Breathalyzers, right? There's this magic box that someone blows into and it tells you whether you're drunk or not.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know that I really buy that, especially because the breathalyzer machines themselves have been under scrutiny in recent years, and it's just, whether they're calibrated correctly, whether it's so it's just. However, you present something like that to a jury, and I think the average citizen is going to say, "Well, this machine, it tells you whether," and so it's fairly damning evidence, right?
Right.
But I'm not going to sit here and say that I would never, as a DA, I would instruct my assistants to not utilize breathalyzer evidence if it was taken, right? But I don't know if I've had many. There's cases where you move to suppress breathalyzer results because they have to, and I don't know whether you know this or not. Probably the average person doesn't if they don't do this for a living, but there has to be a 15-minute observation period of the person before they take the breathalyzer test to ensure that they're not introducing any sort of foreign contaminants to their mouth or belching or anything that could adversely impact the integrity of the test.
Okay.
And so defense attorneys, they move to suppress if they think that, like, say, a booking video or something shows that. Well, maybe the prosecutor can be proactive. You don't have to, basically force the defense attorney to do that. If the defense attorney comes to the prosecutor and has a relevant concern, they look at the video and say, I think I can agree to that. You don't have to go through a hearing in order to do that, right? And have a judge decide. The prosecutor can make the affirmative decision, say, I know you. I work with you. I respect you as an attorney. We're watching video evidence together. It's displaying what you're saying it displays, and I think that your conclusion is a reasonable one, and
so
I think I'm going to agree with that.
Evidence,
that's an example of maybe on a case-to-case basis. Maybe that's something that you do, right? So I think the answer to your question is all evidence, I think, should be treated that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question that I try to ask everybody who comes on the show, which is I believe that everyone who is involved in any way in politics has at least one thing that they could rant about forever. Something that bothers you about the way something has been presented, about trends in the field, about something. There is something that bothers you that I want to hear your rant about, and it can be anything in the realm of politics, law enforcement, DA. But what is that thing that bugs you? And what can you tell me about it?
I don't know that I'm going to deliver a rant.
Okay.
But I will tell you what I've already touched on it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's that concept, the thing that bothers me all the time when I'm sitting back and watching. I mean, look, we've had our fair share of controversial issues or controversy in local and state politics, right? I mean, I think any state does, right? But
yeah, for sure.
There's certain individuals under indictment or under ethical investigations, or there's problems with the appearance of impropriety here with this person, and the procurement cards that people have been using for various perhaps questionable purposes. I don't know enough about it to comment on it intelligently, but I'm just talking about things that I see trickling down through mainstream media like anyone else, right? The thing that always bothers me, and this is from someone that that is running for public office and seeks to serve in an important public office, is that I just don't believe that a lot of the folks that are repeatedly elected to these offices are in it for the reason I believe you should be in a public hold public office. The only reason to seek or hold public office in my position is service to the community. And I think that, and this is when I hit on this earlier, an elected office, a public office, it's a responsibility to others. Yeah. It's not a personal vehicle for prestige or authority, so I can tell other people what to do or get great benefits, or be able to tell people that I'm a congressman at cocktail parties. Right? That's not what it is. It's a responsibility, and it's a responsibility, frankly, you shouldn't hold for an indefinite amount of years. Right. Okay. It's a major part of my campaign. If I'm elected and reelected, I will not serve more than 3 terms. I will not do it. I would almost say 2, but I think there's a lot of work that has to be done in this particular office. So I'm committing to 3 because I am a huge believer in fresh perspective. At some point, the torch has to be passed. That is what fosters innovation and good government and good public service. So
and prevents calcification.
Exactly.
Right.
And that is what, when you're asking me something that bothers me, when I sit back and see all these problems with various public officials, elected and non-elected and appointed, right?
Right.
I think to myself, like, how did we get to the point where this person has been in this role for so long, and especially elected ones, and no one's even run against them? And, no wonder that it becomes the situation where I think they're overly empowered to do whatever they want and act out their personal beliefs and opinions, when in reality, they have no business doing that.
Right.
They are serving a public community, whether it's a town of people or a county of people or a state or a nation of people. You have to always remain connected to what the will of your residents that you serve is. And that, I think, is what drives me crazy when I see people in these really important roles that, in my opinion, are just clearly in it for personal prestige, and they defend it like it's their job. And I deserve to retain this position. I'm never going to let it go.
Because it's mine.
Because it's mine, and
this is my seat. This is my
exactly. And whenever it says, "Oh, it's her seat" or "it's his seat," it's not. It is not. It's my seat. It's your seat. It's our seat.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what bothers me, I think, the most. And that's what drives me to serve, and that's what has driven me to run for office, in part. Obviously, that's sort of an overarching concept, not really specific to the office of DA, but I think that would be my, if I was going to rant, it would be about that. Yeah.
All right. I am coming back to the question I skipped earlier.
Oh, okay. Been eagerly anticipating.
Because we've just got about a minute and a half, so it doesn't have to be super long.
Okay.
But what do you see as the proper role for the DA vis-a-vis federal agencies, such as ICE and federal law enforcement? Because you have we certainly have a situation right now where we are concerned about federal agents coming to our state and doing illegal things and kidnapping people in our state. How does the DA relate to that?
Yeah, well, it's complicated, right? Because, there's law enforcement on both sides of that.
Absolutely.
So, taking a position on who's right and who's wrong, I think that this is where collaboration, I'll kind of go quickly, I know we're running out of time here, but I think this is where, collaboration comes into play, and trying to have some proactive discussions where you're at least reaching some sort of compromise, because the local officials, you can't be accused of violating federal law. Like you have to. So, for example, the courts, right? The courts.
Well, you can be accused anytime.
Right. Sure. Right.
Yeah.
But or acting in a way that appears to everyone that you're deliberately violating the law. It's not. That's not going to, I don't think, bode well. But so the courts, they're instructed not to assist or interfere, right, with ICE officials, the state courts I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the law. I mean, they can't, mass judges cannot decide that they just are taking a personal position on something and say, well, there's federal agents acting under lawful authority, and I'm going to decide that it's not lawful authority, or that's going to cause problems. And I think that, again, I'm going to go back to safety is paramount. You don't want to create any situations where there's local police confronting federal agents in some public area and there's some sort of showdown. Right. Exactly. That's you can't give rise to that. So it has to, I think it is incumbent upon our elected leaders, our public officials, to sort of collaborate on these things and say, hey, this could happen. Let's talk about how to avoid this. And, hey, we've got some high schoolers that are being taken, and detained, and that's problematic. I mean, these are children. Like, what can be done about this? And you're saying, well, mistakes will be made because of well, let's try and make it so mistakes aren't made, because it's a pretty big mistake.
Yeah.
But I would not advocate just, again, you got to do things purposefully, right? You can't just come out willy-nilly and decide to take a stand in the middle of the street when people are trying to effectuate their job. These federal agents. So I think collaboration's key, and anticipation, proactivity.
Okay, thank you so much, Craig MacLellan, everybody.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciated it.
My pleasure.